Hey, Sleepy Sheepy here. Today we're going to be looking at a level 95 rot build, so we're going to be using the Ripple Crescent Halberd as well as the Scorpion Stinger. The Ripple Crescent Halberd has an S scaling in Arcane, which makes it a great candidate for rot grease, so we'll be utilizing that to get rot buildup with the Halberd, and then the Scorpion Stinger has an 8 rot buildup, so it's kind of a off-stock style setup here, but with a dagger instead of an S stock. I'll be putting 45 points into Vigor, 25 into Endurance, 1 point into Faith just to hit that level 10, and then 48 into Arcane. This does allow us to use the Dragon Communion scale, which also gets a S scaling in Arcane, and that's going to be nice for Catch Flame as well as Bestial Vitality or whatever incantations you want to use. We'll be using the Mushroom Crown as well as the Kindred Rot's Exaltation Talisman to boost our AR when we proc the Rot, and then we'll also use the Shard of Alexander to boost our Ashes of War, as well as the Bowgoat Talisman to boost Poise, and the Erdtree's Favor to boost HP, Stamina, and Equip Load. And then as for the armor, we're just going to be wearing the Crucible set, which brings us to a Poise breakpoint of 93. Because this is an Arcane build, there's quite a bit of flexibility when it comes to the different tier choices you can go with. For me, I just went with the Crimson Burst Crystal tier as well as the Crimson Bubble tier, so these are both going to give me HP over time and when I'm close to death, and I found that to be a nice complement to Rot since that kind of does the opposite of the Crimson Burst Crystal tier. The strategy for this build is going to be to apply Rot Grease immediately as the invasion starts and then switch over to Drawstring Rot Grease if needed throughout the course of invasions, or if we have time we'll reapply the full Rot Grease, and then we'll be using probably mostly the Running Light attack, which comes out as a poke, the Jumping Heavy, which has a nice sweep to it, but it is good to delay that attack a little bit, and then as needed we'll be using the Offhand Dagger, which actually is pretty nice, especially if you're fighting against somebody with low poise. This can continuously poise break them and will apply the rot pretty quickly. So I definitely found that useful. The Jumping Light attack is not great since it comes out just with a very narrow hitbox, I would say. So I didn't use that too much. The backstep attack isn't bad. You can definitely do a reverse backstep and kind of roll catch, but I found just Running Lights to be a little bit better and Jumping Heavies to be pretty solid as the standard moveset. You do also get the Overhead Slash with just a neutral light, and that's pretty good. It can catch people out of the air, whereas the just Running Light is not going to catch somebody out of the air. So between those things, definitely a nice way to build up Rot and a pretty solid combo. It's not as strong as like the Halberd off stock, but I did actually enjoy using the dagger. And occasionally I would switch over to two-handing it to use the Repeating Thrust Ash of War. And then this has Spinning Slash on it, but you can't use any other Ash of War with it. So even though it's not a Somber Smithing Stone weapon, you can't add different Ashes of War. So we'll be using Spinning Slash occasionally. And then infrequently I did switch over to the Dragon Communion Seal, and we could use Catch Flame as well as Bestial Vitality, but we will need an extra talisman to go for that. So it's just nice, has a different option. Once you've proc the Rot, you don't necessarily need to use the dagger anymore. That pretty much covers everything that I wanted to say about the setup as well as the strategy. I did want to mention that I am still trying to hit that goal of 1,000 subscribers. Definitely getting pretty close to 3/4 of the way there. So I really appreciate everybody who's been subscribing and just adding to watch time, all that good stuff. So yeah, let's go ahead and jump into the invasions. Alright, so jumping into our first invasion, we have a 3v1 in the area before the Radon boss fight, and this is going to be a lot of magic spam. So if you've seen this channel before, you know that I'm not a huge fan of 3v1s that involve continuous magic spam, so I wanted to kind of showcase this one as just the appropriate playstyle when you have a lot of spells coming your way, no PvE to use, and kind of just your terrain and a melee build. So one thing I'm trying to do is just kind of keep running and back off a lot. So I know that there's going to be different spells coming in at different times, so I try to, be constantly strafing as much as I can, and then utilize the terrain as much as possible to kind of have those spells be firing at weird angles. It means that they might miss. So you'll see me kind of running back and forth between these like two different little hill areas. So where I just dropped down to right now is one spot that's pretty good, and then there's kind of a similar style area on the other side of the map. So I'm just really trying to put anything between me and the spells that I can, and then just strafe a lot, roll a lot, avoid the chip damage. You'll also know that I have the regen tier running, and that ended up being really helpful in an invasion like this, where I'm constantly getting chipped by different kind of spells and Ashes of War, but I do have the consistent regen that's just, you know, giving me some of that HP back that I'm losing. Also, it's worth noting that I'm not really, you know, getting hit by the most optimized spell build, so I would say I was lucky in that capacity where I could have been getting hit for much more damage if any of these players were really PvP optimized to, you know, or over leveled for that matter. And it was just nice to be in an invasion where, even though I was taking pretty continuous chip damage from these spells, I was able to kind of at least whittle down one opponent there, and I think that was the player with the Moonveil. So this is probably less of a showcase of the Rot build itself and more of just a showcase of the melee style play against continuous magic spam, at least in this invasion. The rest of the build is very Rot focused. But mostly this was just kind of a 3v1 that I wanted to put early because I think it demonstrates the utility of the build in an invasion where you have a lot of stuff coming your way. So I was able to kill one Phantom, and then I wasn't trying to kill a host there, but they didn't have much HP, which is not uncommon for some mage builds, so I accidentally killed them. But you know, that was an invasion where I felt like I kind of went in with maybe a little bit of a defeatist attitude where I thought, I don't know if this is really going to work out, but kind of stuck with it and managed to find some opportunities to get some kills. So next up we have a 2v1. We did have a little bit of PvE getting involved, and the Phantom here does have a little bit of Phantom range. There's some attacks there that really looked like they'd be out of range, but I was still clipped by them. So I'm just trying to deal with this Phantom first. You can see they have low poise, so I'm trying to incorporate the dagger more. That's going to be more useful in terms of getting the Rot build up, and then quick chip damage is going to be really nice with the dagger when you're continuously poise breaking your opponent. So they have a straight sword which comes out fast, but my dagger comes out faster, so, you know, I was able to get, you know, a couple 3 or 4 hits in with the dagger. And honestly, I really enjoyed the kind of offhand dagger with the halberd setup. I found it to be more useful than I was expecting, even with a dagger that doesn't have, you know, massive range like the Misericordia or something. You can see me here, I just kind of started spamming repeating thrust just to see if I get the Rot proc, since I was out of the Rot buildup on my halberd, so I might have gotten a little bit sloppy there at the end, but I was really just kind of going for that Ash of War, but we ended up winning it after we did proc that Rot, so it ended up working out all right. This next invasion was a long one, and one of my favorite ones I would say that I've had in a while. So it started out as a 2v1. The player with the dual curved swords is going for a lot of parries, and this player is actually the Phantom, so I think I paid attention to who the host and the Phantom was just by the names when I first spawned in, which I try to do, and was able to kind of keep an eye on that. But here you can see that I'm continuously attacking and not just going for jump attacks, even though they are kind of spamming parries. I would say if you have unpredictable playstyles, when you notice that somebody is parrying a lot, you don't only have to go for jump attacks. I think they probably went for close to 10 parry attempts, and only one of them was a partial parry, and they never successfully parried me. And this ends up coming into play in the long run because they've used up a lot of health just kind of taking damage while going for these parry attempts. So you know, I definitely respect somebody using a curved sword to try to get some parries off, but it definitely wasn't the play in terms of the long run of this invasion. So I'm pretty consistently sticking with this opponent, just trying to dodge the big swings coming in from the Phantom, and then also a blue has shown up now. That's the player with the Colossal Sword who's hitting me right now. So I do have to kind of worry about that player as well. They don't have a ton of health, which is nice, and I am kind of just trying to regain my bearings. The PvE comes in pretty clutch there and does about half their health, and now I can be a little bit more focused on them. And here I'm going for the Rot build up as well as just kind of some halberd hits, and I get very close, just miss the roll catch ever so slightly, and then really have to back off here because I'm getting stun locked and almost die. So I kind of went for a trade there just so I could get in one heal, and I think it ended up working out in my favor. I go for the Ash of War because I see that everybody is kind of surrounding me, and the Spitting Slash has a really nice AoE for just kind of hitting multiple opponents that are at different angles from you, since it's like a 360 spin. And then here I realized that I'm, you know, taking a lot of damage, and it would be nice if some PvE got involved, and I know that there's some pretty high damaging wizards behind me, so I try to bait them towards it. and they're not biting, which is understandable. Those guys can do quite a bit of damage. And you also see the Phantom is using, I'm not sure if I'd call it a glitch or an exploit or what, but it's essentially using a spell and then using the Tree Sentinel shield to shoot that spell back at me. So I know Gigas Thickus has done a video on that where, you know, you can just kind of, I don't know, similar to how Carrion Retaliation used to be kind of bugged. It's the same process of using your own spell to create a like counter damage with a shield type thing. So they're using that somewhat effectively, but I was able to guard break them with it, and I think that discouraged them. And there they hadn't healed in a while. I think they ran out of health, especially because they went for so many parry attempts early on, and once the PvE got involved, it was enough to finish them off. And once the other player starts going for the PvE, the rot buildup is enough to take care of the blue, and then I get the host down quite a bit, and the PvE delivers a final blow. So definitely a good PvE teammate, and probably the right decision to try to back off towards the PvE midway through that fight. Even though it didn't get aggroed immediately, it kind of came in clutch as the fight was ongoing. Next up we have a 2v1, and here we just have kind of two players seemingly co-oping. They're kind of struggling with the ants, so I'm focusing on the Phantom here, who's got Rivers of Blood, and I just begin kind of going for some roll catches. The running light attack is really strong for roll catching, and I'm also trying to get in occasional hits with the dagger. The dagger is really nice because even if you miss, like frequently you'll get a phantom hit even if they are rolling away. So it's a nice way to just kind of keep the rot build up going and get a little bit closer. There I go for a weapon swap so I can land a kick, which does guard break my opponent. And here I start going for the repeating thrusts with the Scorpion Stinger dagger, and this ends up allowing me to proc rot, which is boosting my AR, and then I switch back over to the halberd now that I've got the AR boost. And I do go for one more kick there. It wasn't enough, but I end up managing to hit that one more time with a kick and land the riposte. So that ended up being just a pretty successful way to kind of use the full utility of the build. We had the, you know, Scorpion Stinger, Ash of War, as well as multiple rot procs, and just to finish there. Next up we have a 2v1, and this is in the Lanedell boss fight area, which can be a rough place to invade. You do have the nice aspect that the stairs give you kind of some variety with terrain. I think the worst place to fight is just a flat open area with no PvE, so just having the stairs is somewhat helpful, but obviously there's no PvE here, so it's going to be just the three of us. So we do have a mage kind of casting a lot of spells, and I'm really just trying to wear down their FP and also get a feel for kind of the tempo of the fight. So I will kind of run away when I see that they're going to go for a spell, and then in most cases roll into the spell, because it's a little bit more easy to time in my experience to run into it and roll rather than kind of like strafe it to the side or roll to the side. So especially with the moons, I try to keep my distance because they start out slow and then speed up. So I would rather be facing the moon that's a little bit faster, because it just has a shorter area in terms of where the hitbox can get you. When it's really slow, I think it's harder to dodge. So I try to back off from the moons, and then finally when the wizard here goes for a drink of FP, I start pressuring, and I just get a whole bunch of roll catches. I find like running off to the side a little bit is a nice way to kind of keep tempo with the way you should roll catch with the halberd. So you'll see me kind of pivot off to the side and then go for another running light attack, and eventually just the series of roll catches there are enough to finish off the Phantom, and then it becomes a one-on-one for about 3 seconds and another Phantom gets summoned in. Fortunately though, this Phantom is AFK, so I am sure that I want to make sure that that Phantom dies. So what I try to do is use my Ash of War that is kind of wide sweeping and has a 360 to it, but stay locked on to the host. So that way I can get kind of consistent damage in on the Phantom that's just spawned in and is AFK, but I'm also kind of protected if the host try to come in to get aggressive on me. So that ends up killing the Phantom, and then there I actually jump on the host, which stuns lock them, and then I'm able to get another attack in, followed up by a guard break, and get the riposte. I was about to switch weapons, but kind of had the presence of mind to realize that I guard broke them, and just kind of switch back to out of the menu and grab the riposte. Next up we have a 2v1, and this is outside the Godskin Apostle boss fight. And you will see the host kind of dipping in and out of the fog wall. I was kind of expecting that to get fog walled here, but they ended up kind of staying and fighting, which I did appreciate. We have one person with Sacred Blade, and that Ash of War is extremely useful in co-oping situations with invaders, so I definitely kind of get a little bit worried whenever I see Sacred Blade. I try to really be conscious of when those attacks are coming in. They're fantastic for Estus punishes, especially now that it's a little bit faster, and that was a buff that came in patch 1.07. So I definitely have seen Sacred Blade a lot more, and now kind of know to respect the power of it because it comes out very quickly, has very good range, and you can kind of just reaction Estus punish people. So here I did get the rock proc on the Phantom and just kind of was able to continuously pressure them and managed to get the kill. You also will see me switch over to Bloodflame Talon. This is a kind of an earlier version of the build. I was kind of toying with the idea of using a rot proc at the beginning and then switching over to a blood proc type situation, but I don't use bleed too much, and I just kind of felt that it was a little bit busy within the context of the build. So and I also found that I was really just focusing mostly on the rot for the majority of my invasions. So you will see a couple invasions go on where I did switch over to the bleed setup, but I think that might just get its own showcase if people are interested in it, and sticking to just the rot setup made a little bit more sense, especially because you have the talisman and the helm that are really focused on the rot proc. So I will kind of mention that later as we see that in a couple other invasions, but really the bread and butter of this build is the rot setup, despite having the ability to switch over to some other stuff. So here we have another 2v1, and I get the rot proc pretty early on this host. I do mistime a couple attacks and manage to get hit by the double Radon swords, which do quite a bit of damage. So I'm not really enjoying the space that I'm in, so I try to kind of use the stairs just as a way to change the tempo of the fight a little bit. So just being able to like kind of fall off the stairs from the sides and then run around them does allow me to kind of get the space that I need to get the final hit on the Phantom there. And I do take a backstab in the process, which was a trade that I was, kind of fine with, because getting the Phantom and having enough health meant that the backstab wasn't really going to be an issue. So now I start going for more of the Scorpion Stinger attacks. I found myself doing that when the rot wore off for the Halberd. You can definitely use the drawstring grease pretty regularly. It's pretty fast, and especially if you have kind of the consumables necessary for it. But I definitely found myself just kind of wanting to continue to apply rot pressure without needing to reapply grease or anything, and just switching over to the Stinger. And I found it was a pretty effective way to just kind of, change the rhythm. They get kind of used to the running pokes of the Halberd, and then all of a sudden you're kind of spamming light attacks with the dagger. It changes things up a little bit, and it's especially useful when they have low poise, when you can just kind of continuously stance break them. So I do manage to proc the rot, and then I go for a nice weapon swap. Riposte there, just because I felt like the timing of my opponent was getting kind of predictable. So in some cases I'll find that as an opportunity to just kind of practice some weapon swaps and parries. Next up we have a 2v1, and these two are really kind of determined to stay in this area. They really made sure that I came to them. So I just went for kind of continuous pressure on the Phantom, and the host was not doing a great job of really protecting their Phantom. They have Godfrey's Axe, which has a pretty decent Ash of War, and I think they do manage to kind of get me with the part that makes me fly up in the air, which is always pretty funny. But the coordination of these two wasn't great, and eventually I go for kind of a hyper armor trade with my Ash of War that is able to kill the Phantom. The host and I kind of did a lot of just kind of chase downs and trying to get a couple kills, or a quick kill, but it dragged on a little bit, so we will kind of skip towards the end here. Eventually I did switch over to a parry shield, and rot was definitely useful in terms of chipping them. But I did at this point have a decent idea of when to expect an attack with the axe they were using, so I was able to get the weapon swap riposte, which was, again, nice practice. It is important to just kind of pay attention to patterns that your opponents are using. So for that one, they were pretty consistently going for 2 rolls and then a light attack. So I just kind of noticed that that was a pattern they were employing, and then when I switched over to my parry shield, I was kind of ready to expect a light attack after the first 2 rolls, and then eventually they kind of did go for that, and that ended up being their downfall. So definitely try to be aware of your own habits. If you do play predictably, it can open you up to parries for sure. But moving on, we have this next invasion, which was a 3v1, and just kind of based on the space that I was in and the types of attacks that were coming my way, I was fairly certain that my build was not really going to be up to scratch for winning this invasion. But as I said earlier, it's always good to kind of just trying to maintain an attitude of I'm going to give it my all, even if you are kind of expecting to lose. And so there I almost died a couple times, and I got some pretty decent Estus punishes, they got some pretty decent Estus punishes just with that lightning bolt. But I knew that if I was going to have any chance of getting any damage output on my end, I needed to have a decent amount of health, and there I was able to find just a couple quick openings, which was enough to take care of one phantom. And in invasions like these, I really feel the momentum shift after the first phantom dies. When it becomes a 3v1, or when it becomes a 2v1 from a 3v1, I feel like it's just a huge morale boost. So now I felt like, if I could manage to kill one person while 2 people were attacking me, then I could definitely kill another person while just one other person was attacking me. And I'm able to kind of use this little hill here to space and get some more health, which ended up being really useful. And then here we just had like the ultimate roll catch chain, where this person just got roll caught so many times, and you can kind of see the power of the halberds for running light attacks, which come out as posts. It's just you really can't panic roll in the presence of them, because they will frequently just kind of catch you if you kind of have that timing down. So next we just have the one-on-one situation. You will see me proc the rot and then switch over to the bleed base build that I mentioned earlier, and that ended up being kind of useful just because this person was kind of hiding behind a shield. But in all honesty, I don't think it really mattered in the context of this one-on-one. I think they probably would have gone down just the same to the rot situation. But I do start using the Blood Flame Talon a little bit more and get some blood loss buildup. I would say that was pretty useful in the context of just being able to get a status proc through a shield. That can always be nice as a way to, just kind of keep the pressure coming when somebody is guarding a lot. But, I could have probably incorporated more kicks there and probably would have been able to land them. And then here you see the riposte after the guard break was enough to kill the opponent. So I wouldn't say that the blood loss aspect of this build necessarily was the determining factor in that win. I think the rot was definitely sufficient, but I did just kind of want to mention that again. And definitely let me know in the comments if the more blood loss focused build is something you're interested in. It's a little bit more meta, I would say, than my usual style builds, but yeah, I just had some fun with it, and we'll get back to kind of the rot situation here, which was a 2v1 versus some pretty aggressive and decently playing Madness builds. So having 2 people using Madness against you is, I don't know, a little bit scary, especially when somebody's shield poking behind a fingerprint shield with Vike Spear. That can be definitely a force to be reckoned with. And here I almost get the kill. I would say if they had procced, sorry about that, then they would have died in that moment. And there I went for the backstab, which definitely wasn't the play, and really had to kind of back off here and make sure I didn't panic roll because I had 2 Vike Spear coming my way. And then here I think that was kind of a heads up play, was to just jump down, and that gave me enough space to get a heal in and kind of change the area we were in, which was great. It also allowed me to get a rot grease in, which was also pretty solid. And here I begin getting some more attacks on the Phantom. They aren't doing great with health. They pull out a parry shield right when I go for a jump attack, so that worked out in my favor. It's definitely possible they could have got me with that. And there I just mess up the timing of my roll and go for the boluses, but I'm a little bit too slow and I get madness and just kind of wrecked in the corner. So unfortunate spacing on my part and just a little bit too slow with the boluses, and the madness buildup really got me. But on the bright side, we do have a Phantom with pretty low health, so it ended up working out in my favor, I would say, in the long run, but was definitely a, I don't know, kind of on the edge battle. All this madness build up versus rot, which is not quite as strong as a status proc. It was a little bit difficult, but I tried to, kind of keep my health up as much as I could and avoid the Ashes of War that were coming my way. And then here, I would say I do go for a kick and got kind of lucky that the Phantom there wasn't able to get me with their shield poke, and I do manage to kind of avoid the incoming Ash of War with Vike's Spear. And then I go for a couple dagger attacks in just a moment after this Phantom is really low health, and I think that kind of threw off their timing, and I was able to switch over to the Halberd and just kind of get the final kill. And you can see how high my madness meter was, so it was pretty good timing in terms of how things worked out, with me being able to get my Halberd attack off to kind of stun lock both opponents, killing the one Phantom all before the madness meter took me out of the ability to get the final kill. So once it's down to a one-on-one, I'm using the dagger a lot more because my opponent is not using a hard-hitting weapon, and they're getting stun locked pretty continuously by my dagger, and I'm definitely out-poisoning them because I've got 93 poise and they're using a dagger, and they have seemingly no poise. So I do switch over to the Bloodflame Talon. It doesn't really do anything, and they do manage to die from rot in the end. So definitely shows that this build is capable of kind of outplaying something as strong as madness, although I definitely had a difficult time with it. Next up we have a 2v1, and this one I was a little bit sloppy, I would say. We do have somebody with an Ultra Greatsword, and they kind of, I think the first part they flipped over my Spinning Slash attack, which was definitely unfortunate, and then here my timing is just a little bit off. They're going for some running light attacks, which come out decently quickly with the Colossal Swords, and I just kind of need to back off. But here I do manage to kind of bait them into a small area that I know that I can get Spinning Slash off, and then manage to get both of them with just a running light attack. Quickly managed to get a heal off. I would say the ability to poise through those attacks was pretty instrumental in me surviving, and then I just finish off the host with a dagger. Next up we have a 2v1, and this one was, I found this to be a little bit more difficult than I felt like it should. We have somebody with the Rot Battle Axe, which is definitely a cool weapon, and then we also have somebody just sending a lot of the Moonlight Greatsword, Ash of War heavy attack my way, which is making things difficult in terms of getting off continuous pressure on the Phantom. If my playstyle was more towards just going for the host first, I think this wouldn't have been so bad. I could have just, dodged the player with the Rot Battle Axe and then gone, and applied pressure to the host much more easily. But I do always like to go for the Phantom first, so I tried to just kind of use this giant pillar and just kind of some of the corners to my advantage, and stay out of the way of the Moonlight Greatsword, Ash of War. It was pretty nice once they had that buff kind of wear off. I was able to guard break them and get the riposte, which did most of their health, and then there I tried to go for a Spinning Slash wake up, but the Phantom was able to poise break me and kind of interrupt that. So here I managed to get another guard break, and you'll see that the Phantom here is guarding quite a bit with that weapon, which is good for damage negation, but it was definitely leaving them open to getting guard broken. So here I'm using this kind of circle a little bit better in terms of terrain. The host is, sending more spells my way, so having something like a giant rock pillar to just kind of hide behind continuously is pretty nice in terms of being able to continuously pressure the Phantom. And here I kind of take a second, reapply Rot Grease, which I feel will definitely add a little bit more pressure to anyone that I proc it on, and then also give me the AR boost if I do proc it. So having a little bit of time to reset there was definitely nice. Utilizing some of the drawstring grease was also an option. But it's a little bit of a new process to me. I don't usually use greases too much. So here we can finally see the Phantom does get guard broken and ends up being kind of their demise, and then I'm able to kind of just take on the host in a one-on-one situation, and it's definitely not too bad. Spinning Slash does most of their HP. They do get a heal in, and I start going for the Rot proc, just getting some quick attacks off with the dagger. You know, even if I'm not doing much damage, it's, you know, working out in my favor. For sure, and now that the Rot is procced and my AR is boosted, I'm just going for normal light attacks, and I do pull out a parry shield. Here I was hoping to get a prediction parry, but the Rot kind of takes care of that host before it matters, so definitely successful invasion there, but I would say I struggled a little bit with the Moonlight Greatsword more than I would have liked to, and maybe going for the host rather than the Phantom first would have been the more correct approach. Next up we have a 3v1, and this one was kind of weird. There was a not great coordination between everybody. We had kind of a host that was taking a back seat, and then kind of different levels of interest for the different players. There I almost get the Phantom, but I'm stun locked by a jumping attack from the other Phantom, and then I unfortunately roll out when I probably should have remained pressuring and grabbed that guard break riposte. But, you know, this one Phantom is fat rolling, so I'm pretty confident that I'll be able to get to them eventually. I am able to do most of their health again with the Spinning Slash Ash of War, and now it's just kind of the time for chase down if I can avoid getting hit by the person with the dual great swords. And they do back off for a second, which allows me to get a running light attack and take care of that Phantom. I would say this other Phantom that's currently alive is definitely more of a threat, but because the host has really taken a back seat, they aren't really getting any assistance, and they just kind of start running. They do have some regen on, which I think was part of the reason they started running, but when it's just a one-on-one with somebody with dual greatswords, those are really decent at delivering lots of damage, but they are fairly slow and predictable, and this player wasn't really utilizing the full scope of their moveset. I think it's important to use both light attacks with the single sword as well as you know, light attacks with both swords or jumping attacks, but everything is pretty easy to read. I'm going for some backstabs on the jumping attacks. There we do see them start incorporating some of the light attacks, but it might be too little too late at this point. They are kind of separated from their host and are just getting kind of roll caught, and then we have the added pressure of the Rot proc. So I would say if they had mixed up their moveset a little bit earlier, they might have managed to, you know, get some decent chip damage on me and maybe had some more continuous initiative. But when you go for just jumping attacks with dual greatswords, it's a little bit difficult to maintain pressure and initiative that you need to kind of take care of an opponent in a one-on-one. So we do finally catch up to the host, and they're kind of just hanging out guarding. They're also using a fire-based weapon as they're standing in water, so it's not great, and then PvE just kind of comes in and makes my job pretty easy. So definitely a bit of an odd one, but successful nonetheless. And I say it started out at its most difficult point and then just got pretty gradually easier. Next up we have a 2v1, and I kind of enjoyed this invasion. They were using that pillar there pretty successfully in terms of just kind of hiding behind it. The Phantom there did manage to hit me with a Carrying Grandeur as they were kind of hiding behind the pillar, which was definitely a kind of heads-up play on their part. However, we do manage to get the in-sync Spinning Slash dual Ash of War kill with just kind of a weird auditory effect, which I kind of enjoyed. So definitely needed to level Vigor a little bit more, and were able to win that one without too much trouble. Had they been a little bit more optimized, they might have been able to one-shot me with Carrying Grandeur. It's extremely strong, especially if you can land the charged version, but alas, I kind of got wise to the plays that they were going for, and it didn't work as successfully in later moments. Next up we have a 2v1, And this one was pretty chaotic. We had the gargoyle outside that was sending kind of the beast roar equivalent attacks that they do, and that was pretty damaging. It was also kind of cool just in terms of like the pillars breaking all around, and you have kind of a Hoarfrost stomp to just deal with continuously from the host. So this was just kind of me trying to use the pillars to my advantage, not get hit by the gargoyle's attacks, and also continuously apply pressure to the phantom. At this point, they're pretty much on their back foot, but my stamina was not quite where it needed to be, and I wasn't able to punish their heal. There, the gargoyle does quite a bit of damage to the phantom, and I am getting kind of chipped with this Hoarfrost Stomp, which is a pretty useful way to just kind of apply chip damage in this space. It does take up quite a bit of the floor, and I think the host was pretty aware that I was going pretty continuously for the phantom. Eventually we do start getting close to proccing them with rot. I do reapply my rot grease as well, and I'm just trying to kind of use the pillars as much as I can to avoid everything that's coming at me from the mage. And there we do finally proc the rot, and that is enough to kind of help the pressure continue and really put that phantom on their back foot. And now that it's just a one-on-one situation, we can kind of easily dodge the Hoarfrost Stomp, get a jumping heavy in, and then follow it up with some nice light attacks with the dagger. Next up we have just a one-on-one fight, but this was kind of a like battle mage situation. You can see them using Terra Magica, and for this I tried to back off and just kind of really respect the amount of damage that they could potentially be outputting. So the first goal of mine was to just try to play pretty defensively and also get them out of the Terra Magica kind of area, which is boosting their magic attacks. So I try to stay a little bit aggressive when I have an opening, but also, you know, if they start attacking me, I'm gonna be pretty quick to back off. They do have a decent amount of poise. I see they have some elements of the Bull Goat armor set, so I don't want to get caught in a bunch of Carrion Slicer attacks or something. So I just kind of, you know, when I start losing HP, I do want to back off pretty quickly. But now that we've gotten them out of the Terra Magica area, I am able to just kind of continuously apply pressure. And I think they're kind of on their back foot. I think maybe they were expecting to kind of more quickly have me dealt with than they did, and now they're not really sure where to go. So the chase down kind of continues, and I just kind of want to mention that because it is kind of an important way to approach somebody when you see that they're really set up for just kind of being a high damage output mage, especially if they're taunter tonguing or something like that person was. So next up we have a 2v1, and this one is going to be the last invasion of the showcase, and I got a little bit salty. We had somebody light rolling as well as a host that was using Moonveil, which was kind of a difficult setup to play against, and we also had a phantom that quit out right before I got Estus from them. So a little bit of a, I don't know, not really a cool move within the spirit of the game, I would say, to quit out like that so that your invader doesn't get any Estus, but that's all right. We were able to eventually roll catch them a couple times. Overall, I would say I really liked this build. Using Rot in a kind of more meta-related setup, so something like a Halberd off-stock type style is definitely fun, and I would probably, you know, do it again. As always, if you made it this far, I just wanted to say thanks so much for watching. Really appreciate everybody's support. And if you do have any build recommendations you'd like to see, I've got a list going. Definitely seen more recommendations recently, and I'm going to try to get to all of them. So if you do have something you'd like to see, something funny, something weird, just whatever, I'm always happy to give new stuff a try. And yeah, thanks so much for watching. Have a good one.